Hi, I'm Larry,
I'm Gret.
I'm Christy.
and welcome to Dangerous Drag Queens and Other Deviants.
A podcast about the outrageous and sometimes dark world of drag, gender, and sexual identity, and how communities facing stigmatization are making a positive impact just by living their lives out loud.
Brought to you by Virtual Arts.
Hi, this is Larry Pellegrini.
Hello, I'm Gret Gonzalez.
And I'm Christy Patty. Welcome back to our first episode of 2025 for Dangerous Drag Queens and Other Deviants. Today, we're interviewing Micah Bucey, Senior Minister at Judson Memorial Church. This conversation is so fantastic, so we're just going to kick it off and let you listen. Hello, Micah Bucey. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. It's so good to see your face.
It's great to see you. We go back a long way.
I was going to say, yeah, we need some context here, guys. So
yeah,
you don't have to say that amount of years, maybe, but we would love to know how long you've known each other.
Might as well. We earned those years, you know?
We have earned those years.
We go back to like 2001.
Wow.
Maybe, yeah.
No, 2000, because it was summer of 2000.
Wow.
So we were in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown together was how we first met. I was Sally and Micah was my Linus.
Oh my gosh, forget it. Friendship for life.
Right. But we went to college together. After that, we went to Fordham. And I knew Micah in the context of I was a stage manager and he was an actor, and we worked on a bunch of productions together. And but the road since college has led you in a very kind of different but sort of similar, I would say, probably way. So I think the most interesting thing to start with would be kind of what was the path that led you from acting to seminary life?
Ooh, so first of all, I think of theater and church as being very much intertwined, for probably very obvious reasons and maybe some reasons that we'll get into as well, that are a little more, clandestine. But I would say, I grew up the son of a preacher man, in Northeast Ohio, so church was my context. And I feel very, very lucky to say that church was always a safe place for me, which I realize and have realized more and more is not the story of many queer people. But I was a very queer kid, obviously from a very young age, to obvious to many of the people who encountered me. But the place where I felt safest was with my church community. I feel like elementary school was hell. Middle school was hell. I feel like middle school was hell for everybody. Even if you were like a popular kid, I feel like I look back on those years and I'm like, I think everybody was going through hell. But high school was hell too. But in the midst of that, church was like the place where I felt very nurtured as a queer person. And so I planned to come to New York City to go to Fordham University, study theater and theology, and immediately go into seminary, once I graduated from undergrad. And about halfway through college, through undergrad, I officially came out, as a gay person. Because up until that time, I knew myself to be queer, right? Like with a lowercase q, I was weird. I liked, I liked things that I wasn't supposed to like as like a little boy, etc. But I had no context, right? We're talking like the 80s and the 90s. I had nobody was talking to me about like, do you think that you're gay? So when I came out, unfortunately, I'd started to dabble in a little bit of fundamentalist Christianity, even though that was not what I was raised in. And so suddenly when I came out, I wasn't able to reconcile those things. I was like, you know what? If I'm coming out as gay, I gotta leave church really fast. And so halfway through undergrad, I abandoned that plan to go to seminary and, spent, around 7 years, so the remaining 2 years of undergrad, and then the few years after undergrad, really kind of running from church and finding my church in theater community, in queer community. And then I, around the age of 27, 28, I was having my heart broken a little bit by the arts world in New York City. I don't know if anybody else has that experience, but I it was sort of like I was like there has to be something more, and then I thought, you know what? I need some spirituality, and so I started to explore this again. Luckily, at that time, I had a mentor who had been my theater history professor and who then had become my boss. So I was assisting Morgan Jeunesse at an arts agency. Morgan just died a few weeks ago, which was a huge shock to me and a huge loss. But at that time, I was assisting Morgan, and we were doing a contract that actually never came to fruition as a production, but we were working on a contract for a revival of a musical that had started at Judson Memorial Church. And I started thinking, like, what is this place? What is this? What's this place I'm reading about that had this weird play that started there? And I went to Morgan and I said, you don't know this about me, but I came to New York thinking I would become a minister, and I abandoned it, but now I'm thinking about going back to it. And Morgan said, this is probably the worst mistake of your life. But if you're gonna make, you should go to Judson because they're really weird. You'll fit right in, and you'll learn if you should be making this mistake. And so that's how I walked into Judson, June of 2009. And I was like, this is what I need. I need a church that thinks of spirituality very expansively. I need a church that is committed to radical justice seeking. I need a church that is affirming and even celebratory of LGBTQIA people. And I need a church that thinks of artists as modern day prophets. And everybody at Judson was like, check, 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 check. That's what we do. That's what we're trying to do. And I was like, well, great. I'm never leaving. And suddenly, 15 years later, they just keep not firing me, and I'm now the senior minister. So that's the story.
Love that.
That's amazing. And of course it was Morgan that
It's the
was
truth. I mean, we
yeah.
can talk, we can have a whole episode of
Oh,
about Morgan Jeunesse as prophet and as sort of seer and guide of people toward what they're supposed to do. I mean, I think Morgan had a very complicated relationship with um, life in general, and had certainly found Morgan's path through theater and through art and through really affirming artists, especially in a system where capitalism has no idea what to do with artists. And so we can have a whole episode about that. But I think for me, Morgan was a pastor. I actually think that Morgan, whether Morgan would ever own that title or not, I think that what Morgan did for artists is exactly what I'm trying to do with the title pastor at Judson, which is just say, hey, here are some paths in front of you. Let me accompany you and ask you tons of questions and be curious enough that you stay curious about yourself so that you can get rid of and dismantle these systems that are telling you to not be curious, to not step out of line, to not try to stretch the boxes that empire tries to put on you, and to be a deviant. You like how I'm going to sneak the title of the podcast into so many of my answers.
so then you you end up at Judson. For those who might not know, do you want to give a little history of Judson and the work they do?
Sure. I'm going to try to be succinct. I mean,
Yeah.
so Judson Church was founded in the 1890s, right on Washington Square Park. I think a really important aspect of Judson's founding is that location is exactly, it's very, very pertinent to its history. So at the time that it was founded in the 1890s, um, Washington Square was the meeting place between the affluent, very rich part of Fifth Avenue above the park, and then below the park, it was the tenements of Italian immigrants. Um, at that time, right? We're talking in the 1890s. Italian immigrants hadn't even sort of been pushed into whiteness in the US. And so we're talking like very, very poor folks who were being marginalized and living in squalor below the park. And so Edward Judson decided to build a church there that was designed to be the meeting place between those two populations and invite both of them into the space. That's why Judson, it looks like a Catholic church. It doesn't look like a Baptist church. A Baptist church kind of looks really plain, really just like it, like you're not going to have fun there. Um, and
Sure.
a Catholic church, has kind of ornate artistry, right? And so this building looks more like an Italianate style Catholic church. And the design there was, can we make the church look look friendly and inviting to the Italian immigrants who mostly were Catholic. And so,
Ah,
now that I've given that, I'll fast forward through, and basically there have been a series of pastors and, beautiful congregants who have essentially said, along the lines of the founding, who needs us most? How can we be a church for the world instead of a church for ourselves? And instead of it being kind of, it was founded in kind of a missionary style, which we now look back on and we say, listen, this needs to be dismantled, right? This is like missions to other countries. Missions in the Christian tradition have often meant that we are going into populations and trying to convert them to Christianity, trying to give them things that they're not even asking for. Judson has not always done it perfectly, but Judson has instead said, instead of descending on populations, especially endangered populations that empire is marginalizing, how do we actually go to them and say, we want to offer our resources, our human resources, our financial resources, our space resources. What do you need? And so over the course of kind of the 130 years since, I'd say some highlights are Judson Poets Theater and Judson Dance Theater that were founded because we went to artists in the city in the 1950s and 60s and said, what do you need? And they were like, space. And we were like, great, we'll take out all the pews in the sanctuary. And once you take out all the pews in the sanctuary, you have a huge space, right? And so those two really important artistic movements were founded there. Clergy consultation service on abortion was a really huge movement before Roe v. Wade, where we were forming a network of organizations, especially faith-based organizations, and where ministers and rabbis specifically were connecting people who were pregnant, who were seeking abortions, connecting them to safe places where they could have abortions without trying to talk them out of it. Then we had the Prostitution Project, where we went out and asked sex workers, what do you need? We're not trying to make you not sex workers. We're actually respecting the work that you're doing. What do you need? And they said, we need safe places to gather so that we can talk about the dangers that are out there. We can actually build community. We can take care of our kids, etc. Probably the most important, most recent thing that we have birthed has been the New Sanctuary Coalition, which continues now with our immigration work, which is essentially, us going to immigrants and saying, what do you need? We want to be led by you because you all are trying to navigate this horrible Byzantine system that nobody understands and that's designed for you to not be able to navigate them yourself. So how can we create space, not tell you what you have to do or what you need, but instead be led by you so that we can build a coalition of folks who are dismantling this really horrible immigration system.
hmm.
Wow.
It's funny that the piece seems to be something that has made it the whole way through. And not to go back, but I didn't even realize that history. And my mom's side of the family, that was literally one of those families. They grew up on Thompson Street. I don't know that they had a connection to Judson, but they were one of those families
Right.
in that
Amazing.
area in that
Yeah,
time.
amazing.
So that's fascinating.
I mean, it's funny, right? Because I think Judson had no interest really. I mean, if the Italian immigrants wanted to be like there on Sunday morning, I think it was fine with folks, but it wasn't even designed to say, hey, these immigrant families need to come to church on Sunday morning. Instead, it was, how can we give them, what do they need? Do they need language classes? Do they want, places to cook dinner? So I love that connection.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Mm.
What are you doing today to prepare for what is coming in January?
I think I have so many answers to that question, but to try to tie a bow on it, I mean, I will say we are doing everything we've ever done, right? Like, and I don't say that to be cheeky, right? But I think that for me, the most important thing to be doing right now, and this is what I keep saying to my congregation through sermons, is to listen to the most endangered populations. So I think we all are endangered. So I just want to name that.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think within all of us being endangered, I would say LGBTQIA plus folks, particularly trans folks, are very much in danger. Immigrants clearly are very much in danger. women and people who give birth are very much in danger. And I would say, we like anyone who doesn't fit into at least a white Christian nationalist kind of image that you could at least kind of hide inside, all of those folks are in danger. So what I've said to the congregation is basically right now, we have representatives from every one of those populations within our building on
Mm.
some night of the week. So I think what we're doing is both, leaning into listening again to the folks who are right in our periphery, getting very local and saying, hey, what do you see? What do you need? And understanding again that we are not the ones who decide for these populations what they need, but that we need to be led by them. And then also, I would argue, I think we have to be loud. I think we have to be very, very loud. And
Yes.
especially as a Christian church, where we can talk about, I got lots of atheists, I got lots of agnostics. I wake up agnostic each morning, basically, and I'm sort of like, what am I doing again? Oh, I'm a pastor? What the fuck is happening? But I feel like it's still, on the outside and within our, the things that we do, there is still we are founded in the Christian tradition. When I look at that, I think we have a specific role to play here. We have a country that now is moving in this white Christian nationalist direction. The left in the Christian tradition has continuously not had a voice in the public square. We get drowned out by white Christian nationalism. So we have a unique position as a church founded in the Christian tradition to say, hey, all that stuff that they're saying is horrible and that they're trying to eradicate, we celebrate it here. We celebrate it loudly, and we're going to keep doing it no matter what threats come our way. I'll end that by saying, Larry, that the other thing we're doing is figuring out how to protect ourselves, right? If we are being that loud, knock on wood, I'm really surprised that we haven't had more altercations within and around the Judson building. We've been relatively lucky in our history, even when we've been doing really radical things, to not actually have a lot of pushback coming into our periphery. It's happened. But like on our physical location, I think that we have not always felt that we're in immediate danger. I think that's going to change. And I, as a pastor, feel very responsible for figuring out how do we protect ourselves while we are protecting the most endangered among us.
You're supporting really every group of people that's marginalized in America. I know that you say you feel lucky that you've not had issues or situations. Have you had any in the past year?
I typically will get angry letters, angry emails. I have certainly been threatened as an individual. As far as I know, Judson itself has not received, threats saying we're going to do this to or at Judson. But I certainly have been, have gotten, regular notes that are telling me basically that I'm the most horrible person in the world. But again, knock on wood, I would say anything that has happened in the recent past has been mostly kind of like the classic things that happen when you're trying to make community in a space. And the fact that like folks, I don't know about you all. I'd actually love to hear that this isn't happening for you, but I feel like since 2016 and then especially since 2020, we are not okay. Like
No,
Oh no.
it's
we are
okay.
not.
And I regularly come home to my partner Matt, who's a public defender. So right, we come home with lots of stories to tell.
Oh, I can't
And
imagine.
we're both like, I just said to Matt the other day, I was like we're not okay, right? Like I can almost feel the hum, the vibration under people's skin when I'm talking with them. Like I've never given so much pastoral care. I've never had more staff members, congregants coming to me either in true devastation or in desperation, or honestly, a lot of times it takes the shape of interpersonal conflict. I feel very called to really be pastoring to folks, not because I have it all figured out, but because I feel like that I have a spiritual practice that where I'm trying to regularly like say, what's happening with me? Why am I behaving that way? And so I feel like I can meet people there. I'm no expert, but I am an expert in trying to figure out what's going on with me.
Yeah, and isn't pastoring really listening? You
Yeah,
know, which
yeah.
is really what people need. They need to be listened to because they're not being listened to in many cases.
Absolutely. I think my favorite term to describe it is being a non-anxious presence. And I
Mm,
feel like in this age of anxiety, like I feel like non-anxious presence is very, very much needed. Absolutely.
absolutely. First, I'll say I personally appreciate so much what your mission has been in the past and the mission that you're continuing and evolving with, and constantly, it sounds like, modernizing and finding the next way to serve the community and the Christian people who are around you, and that is something that's been very lacking in the Christian church as a whole. And I grew up in going to church and very active in a evangelical church,
Mhm.
um, and I watched my whole generation walk away, almost the whole generation. And those of us who didn't, um, because we refused to, basically,
Mhm.
I don't want it to. We don't want it to be taken over and you know for evil. Basically, we don't want to allow that to happen. However, we're finding ourselves having to constantly, like you say, we can't justify these things. We can't, come to any sort of reconciliation with these things. So how do you then function
Mhm.
and serve the church and be served by the church in that way? So it's been a struggle for decades, really, honestly. So I personally thank you for being a church that is the complete opposite of that. And I'm very encouraged personally, to hear what's still going on at Judson, and that's happening hopefully around the country, and that voice that's been silenced or been drowned out by the louder, more fundamentalist, more white Christian nationalists, um, please keep yelling, and we will keep yelling too, with kindness and compassion, and all of that. But please, I really, really appreciate hearing it, and that this exists,
Hey,
because
yeah.
a lot of times people don't know.
And that's the thing, right? It's sort of like I'm very much non-evangelical, and I mean that like with a
Yeah.
lowercase, right? Like
Right, right, right,
I'm
right,
not evangelical
right,
either.
right.
I'm not an evangelical fundamentalist, but I'm not even a proselytizer for what we're doing, right? Much like what I said about Judson, not really saying like immigrant, when they first opened, like immigrant population that's surrounding the building, come on Sunday morning, let us convert you to our Christianity.
No, no, right,
I'm,
right,
I'm also still not, even with what we're doing, right? Like I don't think that church is or has to be the answer for everyone. What I do want the our space to be, and what I do want Sunday morning at 11 a.m. to be, and everything else, is a place where you can bring your questions, you
yeah,
can bring your messiness, and you can meet in a space and be co-creative together. Meaning understanding two things to me: that you are not responsible for everything. You don't like, I think overwhelm is something that empire depends on. It depends on us feeling too overwhelmed and not thinking that we can do anything. So you end up thinking like, well, if I can't take care of everything, then I'm not even going to try. And then
mm,
you put that up against, but you do have a part to play. Like I think that that's the most beautiful offering that church, spiritual community can offer. And spiritual community is a complete mess a lot. Judson is a messy place. I'm a messy leader, truly.
right.
But what I do want is curiosity and question asking. So you come and you say, where are the places where I feel overwhelmed, and what are the issues that I think are most on my heart and mind to be a part of? And then how do I find the way to not take all of that on my shoulders and feel all of that weight, but instead understand that I can be a part of it. And
Right,
that to me is what we try to do together.
right.
Try to lean into the mess. And I think
Yeah,
church often, it's sort of been like you have to be perfect, and either you got to invite Jesus into your heart as your personal Lord and Savior, or you get kicked out. And me, I'm sort of like, Jesus was also a mess.
right. Exactly.
Let's
Right.
let's talk about a queer radical who like was mad, yelled at people, flipped tables over, like, and but was
Right.
trying to say, I feel this spirit moving inside me. I'm queering myself. I'm queering myself into thinking that and knowing that I can be more than Empire tells me to be. And I want to spread that to other folks as well. Jesus never asked to be, welcomed into our heart as our personal Lord and Savior. Jesus was like, hey, do you feel messy too? Empire's doing that to us. Outer empire and the empires that we're creating inside us. So can we all queer ourselves together and just make a different way? And Empire was like, you know what? You gotta die.
Right. They're still doing it. They're still doing it. Right.
Well,
What,
isn't the biggest fear of empire that people have the answers?
Yeah. Or well, I think I would argue Empire fears questions, right? It
absolutely.
fears people asking those questions. But I think the systems that perpetuate the status quo, they rely on us not thinking that we within ourselves can ask the questions that will get us to better answers.
Right. They think it's outside of us.
Mhm.
Right. And it ain't.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely.
yeah.
I grew up Catholic, so I grew up, with all of the hysterical, something outside is coming to get you.
Yep.
Right.
And my experience helps me and has helped me to be able to speak to other people about not depending on something outside of yourself, but depending on something inside of yourself for the clarity of life. And that way I'm grateful that I was raised Catholic, and I enjoyed it until I didn't.
Absolutely. Well, and I would also say, I mean, to the point of the title of your show, like quite honestly, some of my favorite people are Catholics. So, quick anecdote, I thought like working at Judson, my like idea of Jesus as queer, artistic radical, Jesus as like, spreading this queer message, that was like good news in the midst of empire bad news and violence. Um, I thought, okay, yeah, the ordination committee will get this. So, I went to the ordination committee thinking that I was going to kind of go through, they would get the whole image, the whole vision that I was trying to put there. And I got deferred by the ordination committee from like moving on to become a reverend for 3 months because they said your theology makes no sense. Calling Jesus queer is blasphemous. You can't do these things. And I moved into a zone of defense immediately and was like, I'm leaving it all. I am leaving. I've tried this. I'd been doing it what for like 4 years. So, true privilege coming out, right? I was like, I'm gone. And I luckily got in touch with Roger, the Jesuit priest, and Janet, the nun, and was telling them this story. And Janet looked at me and she said, "You are acting like this is the last hurdle you have to get over,
Wow.
and then it's just going to be smooth sailing from now on." She said, "Do you know how many times I've been asked to leave my order?" And I said, "How many times?" And she said, 15. Do you know how many times Roger has been almost kicked out of the Jesuits? And Roger has this whole thing, like he's been asked to leave several times. He's been silenced by the Catholic Church. He's not allowed to even teach. So he teaches these like clandestine classes at Union Theological Seminary, like in dark corners. And she said, if you are going to actually embody this radical spirituality in the world, it is going to be hurdle after hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. And if you are not ready to jump over those hurdles, then you should stop. Then you should stop doing it right now. And I was sort of like, "Ooh, okay." I got kicked into it by a nun and a priest. But like, right? I think the Catholic Church is this amazing example of the horror of institution and
Mm,
patriarchy with like truly radical people trying to do the work within it. It's analogous to all of the battles that we're fighting because I
yeah.
see Catholic people, being so they are radical. And God knows, I mean, like talk about queens and talk about like drag. Like there's a lot of drag there. There's a lot
Oh
of
my gosh. Yes.
right?
It's expensive drag.
Yeah. That's right.
It
That's true.
is a lot of jewels, I'll tell you. I think it's terrific what you've done, and I think that Yeah, I have been aware of that church always. I was first in New York City in 1977, and I saw many shows there. I don't even remember what I saw there, but I saw many different pieces there. I have friends in Portland who are in their 80s who were part of that community in the 60s there,
Mm.
you
Beautiful.
know, yeah, who speak so highly of it. And it's just, I think it's a really important way to present religion.
Mm, mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm. Yeah,
For people who are feeling ultimately rejected by religion, there are places out there. If you seek them, again, there's personal responsibility in seeking that. And sometimes you're not capable, and the church will meet you, obviously, but and we hope that we meet those people where they need it. But for someone who's seeking a church, to know that there are places out there like that is so, so, so important, especially right now. My goodness, reconciliation is going to be a very difficult battle. And we had this discussion actually amongst the three of us because, I feel one of my callings has been to be a peacemaker in some ways, not a peace, not just keeping the peace for keeping the peace, but literally being a bridge between people. And we had a conversation after the election, when people are just saying, we can't bridge that gap. And in some ways we can't. I do understand that. In some ways it feels like that's so broad, and we need to change our tactics and not allow what's gone on, not to accept it, in any way. So how do you maintain, and maybe you have some insight on that, how do you maintain that sort of essence of being a bridge maker when you don't really want a bridge?
for me, the I don't think that the professionalization of pastors is necessary, but what I really think, and this is where I'm about to bridge it into your bridge building, is that what I want to be doing most as a pastor is helping folks to move into and embody themselves and ordaining them to what they were called to do in the world. Frederick Buechner said that the definition of vocation was that special sweet spot where your heart's greatest desire meets the world's deepest need. So I think that empire depends on us not ever meeting the world's greatest desire with our deep needs of our hearts. And so I want to do that for other people. They don't have to become pastors, but I'm like, if you as a with as a writer, as a parent, as anything, as a lawyer, as whatever, like I want you to connect your vocation and ordain yourself to understand that there is something, I'll call it spiritual. I it's a placeholder word that people can replace with whatever they need, but I think there's like find the spiritual calling that you have to embody before you make that final step into whatever awaits us after life. But Gret, I think for you, I think the hardest thing about the bridge building aspect is that I really hear people when they say like, that's not what I'm called to do. I think there are people called to do it, right?
Yeah.
I think Empire relies on us not understanding that each of us has our own part to play in the revolution. So for me, it is hopefully being a non-anxious presence, meeting people where they are, asking enough curious questions so that I can like help you get through the muck and the crust that is built over that place where your heart's deepest desire can meet the world's greatest need. And maybe you leave that conversation or series of conversations being like, well, holy crap, I never knew that the thing that I did, I can embody that, even more, and that's a part to play. But I do think, like, Gret, if you feel like bridge building is something that you have the bandwidth for, you have the strength for, like, God knows I want to encourage that, right? Because I
Mhm.
think you're absolutely
Right.
right that there's the need for these things. People are hurting, right? Because all of these structures and systems, they hurt all of us. I am more interested right now in focusing on the more endangered folks. So that's where
Right.
I'm going. But God knows if you feel like talking to the Trump voters, down the street from you, like I don't want to dismiss that, right? Like I think that's very important. And all of these things combined actually create the tapestry of creating the vision of the future that we actually need. I will never say to someone who's coming to Black Trans Liberation Kitchen, you know what? Like, I think you should really reach out to the folks who are, voting on the anti-trans bill, and educate them. That is not what, that's actually dangerous to them, right?
Right.
And it's
Right.
not what we need. It's not their role.
No.
They're
Right.
trying to survive, right? They're just trying to survive in a world that keeps telling them that they shouldn't even exist.
Absolutely.
But I think that there are people who can do that. So I'll hush, but I love that idea of like, who's the bridge builder? Who's the radical? Like, all of these things are, they combine, like Voltron, which is actually, like, I know that we weren't giving away our ages, but I'm like, as soon as I say Voltron, I'm like, I've lost part of the audience, because they're like, what in the world is that?
Well, you didn't lose us. We all know Voltron, that's for sure.
Yeah, but no matter what you do, you are building a bridge. Every day we build bridges to our next moment. I was very angry after the election, and I'm still pretty pissed off. But I've now I'm putting that into my writing, because it allows me to say it to myself. And it allows me to create characters that I can destroy, that aren't real human beings. You know what I mean? So it does give me a forum to build a bridge back to communication.
Right.
That's really what we've lost.
What I think we really like at Judson is authenticity. And that thankfully takes the form of, like, inviting in particularly marginalized, endangered folks who are trying to live their authentic reality, in systems that have been created for them to not feel like they can. But we really value authenticity above everything else. I paint my nails, I kind of exist in this non-binary space. But it's funny because a few months ago, we were in a church meeting, and this very well-intentioned congregant, who, I think, nothing nefarious was intended by this comment. In fact, I think it was a celebration. But they said, well, it's like Micah, who is always trying to teach us about, non-binariness and gender and sexuality. And I stopped and I said, folks, I'm not trying to teach you about non-binariness and gender and sexuality. I'm trying to teach you about liberation. And for me, this is liberation. Being an ordained pastor in front of you with my nails painted, flouncing around, being like everything but in the in between the binaries of all the things that are killing us. Like, it can get specific, but I'm trying to teach you about authentic liberation, because that's what I think that the Jesus that I know in my heart, that's what Jesus was trying to teach, right? I love that you're going in, that you're pouring this rage, this anger into writing. That sounds like an authentic space for your authentic rage to really be a gift to you and a gift to
It
the
has
world.
value for me.
Yeah.
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 I just want to be cognizant of everybody's time, because we could talk all day. I would be remiss, though, if I did not bring up the
Oh,
Book of
yes.
Tiny Prayer by
yes.
Micah Bucey. So if you are in the middle of this country, or Portland, Oregon, or wherever you are, you can get this fabulous man's words. Do you want to say a little bit about how this happened?
The tiny bit that I will say is that, I brought up mess earlier, right? Like, I think I have a whole spirituality built around mess and I want to model messiness and its beauty for my congregants, for, like, I think that's where creation happens. So the Book of Tiny Prayer was written during the first year of the pandemic, where I just was waking up as such a mess that I thought, in order to combat overwhelm, I'm going to write a tiny prayer a day that is just about one thing, the one intention I have for the day. Sometimes it was about something that was scary in the news. Sometimes it was about something that was scary in my body. And then for accountability, I posted it on social media. And so I did that for a year. So there are 366 of these tiny prayers. And beautifully, there was an editor on Facebook that we were friends because we'd done immigration work together. And he, on the day that I announced that I was going to stop doing it, he said, you know what? I've been following these. I love them. I'd love to publish them. And by the way, I've compiled them into this document for you. So here's your manuscript. And I was like, oh, that's how to write a book. Accidentally write it and have an editor say, here it is for you.
Well, listen, thank you so much for being here. It has been a pleasure. Christy, I don't know if the questions that you ask are relevant.
Do you have any one accessory that you like to, instead of perform in, I'll say give sermons in?
Absolutely. I mean, it's my nails. I mean, they are a mess right now, but they're so I always so what these are designed to do is that every time I look down at them, it reminds me that I am called to be wearing my queerness everywhere. That basically in a world where I can choose to be quiet, I can choose to not be fabulous, I can choose to take this nail polish off and just kind of look like a normal person, that it's my calling to wear my weirdness, wear my queerness, and then embody that so that other people can hopefully feel invited to wear their own queerness in whatever way is authentic for them.
Micah, I cannot thank you enough.
I can't thank
This has
you
been
enough. Thank you
amazing.
so much. Absolutely. Thank you for all you're doing. We need this podcast right now. Okay. This is what we need to be doing. We all need to be deviants right now.
Yeah.
We all need to be drag queens probably too, but we all need to be deviants. Okay. So I'm with you. I'm listening. I'm watching. And if I can ever be of help to you all, if I can ever be of help to anyone who's watching or listening to this, please reach out to me. I'm always available.
Oh,
Thank you.
that's a great thing. How do people find you? And then we'll
I'm on Instagram as Rev Micah B, which is actually my street name on file with the NYPD from my arrests. And then also, I'm on Facebook for the time being. Let's see what happens with Meta.
Yeah.
And then also, I'm Micah at Judson.org. I've got a little weekly a newsletter that goes out that's basically about everything I'm enthusiastic about in the world, which is basically everything. You can go to micahbucey.com. It's all there.
Micah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you all so
Thank you.
much.
You.
I
My
love,
goodness.
love him.
What a fascinating person Micah is. My goodness.
Man, that
And what a
conversation could have went
mission.
on forever. It
Yeah.
flew by.
You know, he's an original. You know, you'll never be able to find another like him doing what he does. That's I think one of the beautiful things about him and what he's doing is, you know,
Yeah.
patience and listening and, you know, addressing all these extraordinary groups that need somebody like him.
There's just a sense of wisdom about him, a sense of but openness to that evolving and changing as the world evolves and changes and the people around him evolve and change, and what is the next need that needs to be met. And I don't know, that sense of a non-anxiety. What did he say? How did he say it? It was so clever.
Non-anxious.
A non-anxious presence,
Yes.
you know,
He
and
is-
what
he
that
is-
means for each person individually. It's just fascinating. Just
I mean,
amazing.
he talked about he's a masterful mess. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? He is, and he talks about that in such a wonderful way. But the mess that he is so needed at this moment.
Yes.
Right. And the wisdom to know everybody's a mess. And the fact is, you can own it and turn it into something for good. You know, it's okay. We don't have to put on a perfect facade.
You know, I mean, I would love to be able to talk about something good that's happening in the world right now. But I tell you, January 20th will be
It's coming quick.
it will be an extraordinary day in all of the wrong ways.
It's insidious. It's very loud and boisterously awful and evil, and then it's very quietly evil as well with these kinds of things that you're talking about now, Larry. You know,
But you
court
know,
cases and
And I'm pissed at ABC for settling that suit when Stephanopoulos didn't do anything wrong. Yeah.
people are scurrying around everybody because they know that the possibility is that he will, even if he doesn't do anything terrible to them, you know, he sends people to look at their IRS statements.
he
I bet
just
he has a messy bedroom.
He would if he didn't have people cleaning up after him all
Exactly.
the time.
I was gonna say he has a staff of people who come in and take care of that.
I'm
Kidding.
certain of
Matter.
that.
It's still messy. It's got bronzer on the pillowcase.
Oh yeah.
Ketchup on the
Yeah.
wall from where he's thrown his plates.
No, it's got notes written on French fry packages. I mean, it is. It's not
Oh
fun.
my gosh. On that note, you guys, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Dangerous Drag Queens and Other Deviants, as well as Virtual Arts on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. And be sure to check us out at www.virtualartsproductions.org for all our latest projects.
And if you like what you hear, please share it with a friend. That's all for now. Keep living dangerously and on your own terms.